These are weapons that 100 nations ban, including some of our closest NATO allies. What made you change your mind and decide to give them these weapons?
It was a very difficult decision on my part. And by the way, I discussed this with our allies, discussed this with our friends up on the Hill.
President Biden on cluster munitions. It's time for our Common Ground segment. Joining us tonight, Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy and Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton. Senators, thanks for being here. I want to talk about your effort on social media and kids, but since this is coming from over the weekend, this is not something where you all see totally common ground. And I want to just talk about it on a news perspective. Senator Cotton, you're for this effort by the administration. Why?
Well, Brett, first off, I say Chris and I think, do see common ground on the need to defeat Russia and Ukraine, and for Ukraine to retake its territory, as I know you do, and the vast majority of Americans. We may have disagreements on this or that tactic or technique in the way we support them. My view is this: Russia has already been using cluster munitions inside of Ukraine, the kind of artillery shells that can spread lots of small bomblets on the battlefield. Russia's cluster munitions have very high dud rates. Our cluster munitions have very low dud rates. Ukraine, as President Biden said, is running very low on conventional and traditional artillery. They're in desperate need of artillery to try to make more gains in their current offensive, and we have millions of these munitions. So I think we should provide it to them. I think we should have provided it to them earlier. I'm glad President Biden took the step he has now, though. And in the end, this is the best way to achieve peace, is to have Ukraine get more battlefield victories and put pressure on Vladimir Putin to come to the negotiating table.
But just to be clear, he also said this weekend that we, the U.S., is running low on 155 munitions. Is that a reason to?
Well, that's another reason to do it, is that we have, again, millions of these cluster munitions in our own stockpiles that we're frankly unlikely to use in any foreseeable conflict. Unfortunately, it's not just 155 millimeter artillery shells. It's a large number of munitions. It's one reason why we need to substantially increase the amount of our defense budget that goes towards making munitions, not just to give to Ukraine, but for our own defenses and also to support a potential conflict over Taiwan.
Senator Murphy, you, like Senator Cotton said, you're supportive of Ukraine's effort, but you tweeted out that you believe that they should have the moral high ground here.
So I think Tom's right. What's most important is that we are in solidarity to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs in order to defend its territory. And I also agree that there is a moral differentiation between Russia using high failure rate cluster bombs in foreign soil versus Ukraine using low failure rate cluster munitions to defend their own territory. I just look to the future, and I know that the United States is going to have to be in the business of trying to build international support to control really dangerous weapons technologies that are coming. And so I don't want to have us do anything that would lose our moral authority in order to protect our troops in future conflicts. But I do think this was a close call, a difficult call for the administration. And I think they did take some important steps to try to limit the downside, the future risk to Ukrainian civilians.
All right, the thing that you are working on closely now, and I know there are a number of things, but this is called Protecting Kids on Social Media Act. Senator Cotton, why is this important, and the list of things that it does in this bill?
Well, Chris and I and our counterparts, Brian Schatz and Katie Britt, all have children. We're all worried about the effects of social media has had on kids. Numerous studies show that it gets addictive very quickly. It exposes them to age-inappropriate content, whether it's obscenities or violence or what have you. And we simply think that parents should have the same right in the digital world that they have in the physical world. You know, parents get a say over what their kids are exposed to in our schools or in our societies. There's laws about parental consent for a variety of things, whether it's tattoos or joining the military or what have you. We think that parents should have a say when their minor children are signing up for social media, and that's not too much to ask. And I think it's one thing that, again, we can all find common ground on, and I think this legislation has a lot of momentum, hopefully has a chance to pass this Congress.
Age verification is a big part of this.
Yeah, right now the social media companies tell you that you can't get on their platforms until you're 13, but it's an honor system, and we all know that there are millions of kids as young as 6, 7, 8 years old who are on some of these platforms that have, you know, really age-inappropriate content all over them. So on this front, what we're saying is that the social media companies just need to do what they say they're doing. They need to keep young kids off of their platforms, and they need to have a system of age verification. Have the family, the parent, upload a document to prove that this child is over 13. So that's really common sense, because I think we can all agree that you shouldn't have 8 or 9-year-old kids on TikTok, on Instagram, with the very adult-based content that gets to you pretty quickly.
Senator Schumer just announced an all-Senate classified briefing about artificial intelligence and national security tomorrow. Are you all concerned about AI and where it's going on that front, Senator Cotton?
That's good. Good to have artificial intelligence in the Senate. Sometimes that may be the only kind of intelligence we get. What I worry most about is losing the advantage we have when it comes to artificial intelligence to China. Right now, America is still the world leader. We're the world leader not only in its economic impact, but its strategic and military impact as well. And I would not want to take any steps that would set us back, because there's no doubt that China, and secondarily Russia, is racing to try to use artificial intelligence in ways that Chris suggested in the conversation about cluster munitions that will give them a leg up when it comes to military competition, and perhaps allow them, as Churchill said about the Soviet Russians once, to enjoy the fruits of victory without actually having to go to war to achieve the victory in the first place.
Senator Murphy.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're taking a look at how do we protect consumers from runaway AI. I mean, we've already seen evidence of these incredibly realistic deep fakes. We've got to have some protection for consumers against that kind of abuse of the technology. And I think it's important for us to have a broader conversation about the real moral cost that will come to our country, to our kids and our families, if all of a sudden the basic human functions like conversation and composition and creativity get outsourced to machines. Maybe that's the direction we go, but I think it's important for us to have a community conversation about the kind of protections that can maybe protect our kids, especially, and our families from the kind of abuses that we already see with AI.
You all work on a number of things. For people who say this place is so partisan, nothing's getting done, here you are sitting together on this bill particularly, but what do you say to them?
Well, listen, it's not a coincidence that the 4 of us that have introduced this Online Safety Act are all parents. We're senators, we're proud of that, but we're parents first. And, we see that parents on the left and on the right just don't feel like they have control over their kids' lives any longer. And so I think this is a really important partnership. There's more of this bipartisanship happening behind the scenes than you think. You're really good to focus on it, because much of what's on the news is just the times that we're fighting. But this is a really important issue to families that conservative Republicans and progressive Democrats are working together on. We hope to be able to get a vote on the floor, because I think you'll see a big bipartisan vote when it reaches the Senate.
Last word.
Yeah, there is a lot of bipartisan work going on. Often it's below the headlines, but as Chris said, we have something in common as parents. Arkansas doesn't have a lot of coastlines, so I don't work with Chris on things related to shipbuilding or the Coast Guard, but he probably works with Republican senators from places like the Carolinas, just like I work with Democratic senators from places like Oregon or Maine when it comes to the forestry industry. So there are lots of examples of bipartisan work that don't always reach the headlines, but are serving the voters who sent us here.
Senators, we appreciate the time.
Thank you.